Welcome back to the Cigar Thoughts broadcast. We're here in downtown Bellingham at the Glow Nightclub. Really thankful to have them as our new host, taking great care of us, putting us up in some nice digs, and bringing some folks out to watch us too. So really want to say thank you to them for having us. With me, as per the usual, are Brent Colt, editor-in-chief of What's Up magazine, and Matt Nichols, former all-conference offensive lineman at Pacific Lutheran University, helped them win a national title. And a little bit different this week, I think. You know, it's week 6 going into week 7, and we're starting to see some themes emerge, which is a little bit troubling. Themes should take a little bit longer, especially these ones. But you two were both at the game, correct?
Yeah.
I really want to hear what that experience was like at the stadium. Brent, let's start with you.
Well, the stadium, we were discussing the stadium thing before we started, but I was up in the Hawks Nest with my son, and it was, first of all, it was amazing watching the game, seeing things, really being able to see everything unfold. It was super cool to get that scope and that view. And it was shocking how bad the Seahawks offensive line was and how absolutely inept. You could really see it unfold. You could see the receivers not getting open. You could see Russ, running for his life. You see him running when he didn't necessarily need to be running. I mean, you could see it just all unfold in front of you, that this was a team that is playing on offense terrible, and it's really was stemming from the offensive line and how much incredible pressure he was getting, Russell Wilson was getting. It was incredibly discouraging. Really fun being at the stadium and the tickets, and I thank my friend Megan Kissinger for giving us the tickets. It was super cool. It was great to be able to take my son, but this was a team that was in the Super Bowl last year, and it was shocking how bad the offensive line is. And it's just like a disease that's spread out to everybody.
Yeah. You could see again that there were systematic breakdowns throughout the game, both offensively and defensively, that we're seeing the same things over and over again, and they're not getting better. And so that's really frustrating. Again, being at the game, you get a totally different view. I love being able to see where safeties are lined up at, how the corners are positioned, what's going on. You could see from one of the very first, I think it was the first third down of the game, Carolina came with a corner blitz off of the short side. Tyler Lockett was wide open for first down, but Russell went. Doug Baldwin had it batted away. Seattle ends up punting. You can see those kind of things, at least I can, that I love to nerd out on.
Yeah.
And you can see those. You can also see that Carolina is not respecting, and I imagine this is probably around the NFL, teams aren't respecting Seattle's deep down passing ability because corners are playing a little tighter and safeties are up closer. I always look to see, is that safety at 12 yards? Is he at 15? He's hanging out at 10, 11, 12 the whole game. Roman Harper was. That's an indication that they didn't really necessarily respect Seattle punching the ball downfield. Now, Seattle took some shots. That pass from Russell to Tyler Lockett that he overshot him. I mean, that's an unbelievable throw. And it looks like Lockett slowed down a little bit. That's a kind of play, something like that. You hit one or two of those. Those safeties are going to have to start being a little more honest. Getting Jimmy Graham open down the seam, those safeties are going to be a little bit more honest. But again, the fourth quarter, seeing those two long drives, and seeing Cam Newton go from being completely inept to being an all-world passer was very frustrating to see. And it wasn't against one corner. It wasn't one play being run over and over. It was just multitudes of unbelievable catches at times, bad coverage at times, and just a frustrating end to that game.
Yeah, and it's interesting,
You were at home, not having fun. Tell us your view on it.
Yeah, I actually watched this game in isolation, which is like the complete opposite. Usually I'm watching with at least a few buddies, but I was just at home watching it, and it was actually really cool because I do watch a different game that way than when I'm interacting.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
And for me, it was it was almost like watching an experiment unfold, where it's like you've got these clashing themes where, no matter how much the team is struggling, they're unbeatable at home, right? Versus this team that has been giving away fourth quarter leads for, if we're real, 3.5 years now. And I remember thinking when it's 23-14, it's going to the fourth quarter, like, what's the stronger play here? Does the home field advantage win out like it did against Detroit, right? Where the same kind of thing started happening again? Or is, this kind of recent performance and letting the leads get away, is that going to win out? And that's the one out. And it was weird. I'm not going to say I was emotionally detached, but it was something that I was just fascinated on, aside from the plays that were actually happening. The troubling thing for me was the miscommunication, right? Like that kind of stuff, where, they were getting beaten regularly. Cam Newton completed 11 of his last 12 passes. The only one he didn't was the drop by Funchess. He was beating them. But, the deciding play was just a complete breakdown.
Yeah.
At a time where that's when other teams crumble. That's not when the Seahawks have crumbled.
Right.
That's why they perform so well in those situations. And to see that happen, it's really, really interesting. I think of someone like Earl Thomas. Sounds like Earl didn't get the call.
Yep.
Sounds like Richard Sherman's in the right coverage, didn't get relayed to Earl or in time or whatever. And that seems just completely unthinkable. And so, he's been really positive about it afterwards, saying it's going to be part of a great story and that kind of thing. But I got to wonder, let's use Earl as sort of a microcosm for this. He's making mistakes that he's never made, and so is the rest of the team. So take a look at Earl, and he's putting a very positive spin on it right now. But, you're talking about a guy with superfluous confidence in himself. Talks about being descended from lions, and this guy is like, he's of a different mind. And you got to wonder, again, what's stronger? Is that 26 years of never doubting yourself and believing that you are the absolute best in the world at what you do? Is that what you take into that next fourth quarter lead? Or does that start to get gnawed at by the memory of recent performance, and they've given up 5 of them, and maybe he's not doing something right, and those doubts start to creep in, and that's how slumps happen. And so, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens, especially if, in a couple of days here, they take a lead in the fourth quarter down in San Francisco. But, for me, it was like watching a very thematic game as opposed to a specific one. There was a lot of trends that are starting to develop. One of which being that Seattle is the most physical team for 3 quarters, and they have been pretty consistently.
Yeah, they're not getting blown out.
Oh, no,
By any
that's the
stretch.
thing.
No,
And
that's the
Nick
thing.
Fan always talked about this on KJR this morning, that, they're not getting blown out. We're playing the 49ers, who have gotten blown out.
Yeah.
So we can at least take that.
And
But that's a more.
And I know you don't mean that as like, hey,
No,
whatever,
yeah.
we'll take what we can
Participation
get.
driven.
Right.
But what you're saying is something that I think is really true, and a blessing that is so easy to overlook is the Seahawks haven't been out of a game in 4 years. Every single Sunday, you are given a good game. No other team, literally in NFL history, has had a stretch like that, where they are never out of a game, never lost by double digits. What is it, like 68 games now? It's an insane thing. So, what you're saying is true. Yes, they're not getting blown out, which means they are those 1 or 2 plays away that we talked about last week. But, man, it's wild to see those breaks that have gone Seattle's way so consistently start not to.
Yeah, well, and Pete Carroll always talks about the themes of controlling the clock and getting turnovers, and the turnovers, again, were in our favor.
0-3 this year when winning the turnover.
Yeah,
battle,
which is
after being 33-6.
Yeah, that's a complete outlier
Yeah.
at this point. Those are outliers. But we're seeing things over and over, and I think the short week is something that's wonderful for them, because they have to rally and focus unbelievably on one task at hand and then go do it. They don't have time to sit around and wait and wallow and everything. So bouncing back, this is going to be a real interesting test to see not only physically how they bounce back, because I can't imagine playing an NFL game on a Sunday and then having to fly on Wednesday and then play on Thursday. That's almost unfair that the NFL does this to every team. But then also mentally, are we going to see the same mistakes, or are they correctable? Because a miscommunication between a cover 3 and a cover 2, if it gets called in one way into the Mike's helmet and then hand signaled differently, that's one thing. But if we see those kind of communication breakdowns again, then this is something that's not just the players, it's coming from the support staff on the sideline as well.
And that's focused on the defense. And but that's not going to make the offensive lineman any better. And for me, as I've thought about this game over the last 2 days, everything is just coming back to that offensive line and the team's inability in the fourth quarter. We've put everything on the defense. The fact that they gave up those drives, the offense didn't have a drive of more than 2 minutes in the fourth quarter. I think it was 5 minutes total. It was horrendous. So the defense, which was short Wags, short Jordan Hill, short Burley. I mean, we're thin as hell right now, and I think there was an issue that nobody wants to talk. I think these guys were gassed, you know, and so they don't have as many guys coming through, and they're going to make more mental mistakes, and it's because the offense can't sustain a drive if their damn life depended on it in the fourth quarter. They scored a TD in the fourth quarter against the Rams. That's it. They haven't scored a TD since the Rams game in the fourth quarter. You know, he's being sacked 1 out of every 10 times. He's being hurried nearly 1 out of every 2 times that he steps back. It's such a shit show on offense that I think that's bleeding into the defense.
Pressure rate that any quarterback has faced in NFL history.
In NFL,
and this was the first week we actually saw them make a personnel change and bring Patrick Lewis in at center and bench Drew Nowak. Now Lewis is injured. They went out and re-signed Lemuel Jean-Pierre today. It'll be interesting. Drew Nowak, I would imagine, has got to go in because there's 2 days for Lem to get in there and prepare.
And Gary Gilliams, he's out.
So
I believe
I'm curious if we're going to see some more personnel changes, because watching Justin Britt, he's struggling at left guard quite a bit in the one-on-one matchups. I mean, you see him dropping his head, you see him missing his target. At what point is Alvin Bailey going to come in at more of a regular consistency? We saw them bring Bailey in at the goal line situation, and he made some great blocks. Are we going to see Alvin Bailey come in? And, you know, they did this a couple of years ago with Paul McQuiston and James Carpenter, where they rotated guards. I mean, nobody ever rotates guards, but Tom Cable's more than happy to do that. And who cares if it gives a tell? If it makes your team better, do it. And I imagine they're at the point where it's like, we got to do something. And so we'll see what they do if it's time for another personnel change.
But that's still, you know, I mean, there are jokes about that. It's still, you're still taking crap for crap. You know, and these are professional athletes. I'm, you know, a fat guy that watches games on Sunday, so I'm not, you know, trying to disparage them in that way. These are professional guys, but they are not. They are lower level professional guys, and you might mix in Bailey, you might do this or that. It's still not good, and there's no reason to believe it'll change anytime this year. And that was the part when we were talking about this in week 2 and 3 and 4. Well, the line will gel. The line will come together. I'm not seeing.
It's interesting because a week ago versus the Bengals, we were talking about how great they looked in the run game, and everything was fine, or not. Not everything was fine, but everything was better. And now this is a step back. We did the same thing when we were looking at them after the first Rams game, when they just got absolutely demolished, and they were like, "Hey, they look better versus the Packers." And we ups downs, and right now this is a down. There's no two ways about it. Don't try to sugarcoat it. What are we going to be thinking on Thursday night, Friday morning? And hopefully it's an up. We need to see some ups. It's definitely the weakest link on this team right now. And again, not being able to maintain those fourth quarter drives is what's putting our defense in really bad positions. We play a lot of our really good players on special teams too, so they're getting a lot of snaps in the game, not just on defense. Don't forget the number of snaps. factor in the number of snaps that they're playing defensively and then also on special teams. I mean, watching Sherman try to block extra points is a thing of beauty, or field goals. Watching these guys absolutely compete, but that takes a toll on them.
And then when you've got your strong safety, just came in to the season a few weeks ago, missing 4 weeks of training camp or 6, however many weeks it is, and while he can go ahead and everybody can say, oh, Cam, he's a machine, he'll be in there. They haven't had all that time. They missed all that time in practice, and I think that goes back to part of the problem we're seeing on defense as well, is that it's just not a fluid. It's not working as a cohesive unit, in part because this key element wasn't there for so long.
Well, yeah, I mean, Cam and Byron Maxwell could communicate, and they just knew each other, but now we have a new corner over there in Kerry Williams, and Kerry's never played with Cam and knows what Cam does and know how he adjusts to calls. So we're seeing some of those issues come up, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought the communication between those two was, really apparent in the Cincinnati game when those seam routes to Eifert. And it's funny, that's not something I had considered until you just said it, is that, Kerry Williams has only played, 3 games now with Cam Chancellor, and the ability to communicate, and even more so than communicate, is anticipate what those guys are going to do. That's a relationship I hadn't considered, was still really, really new. It seems, or at least the hope is, that this team's kind of at a crossroads right now. I'm hoping so, at least. I hope the crossroads wasn't 9 months ago. But, this is kind of that point where they were at last year, where they had the, players only meeting about the sunflower seeds, and it may or may not have led to that great streak that they went on, but it seemed, definitely coincided. We'll probably hear some stories about some meetings this week, I would assume. Now, we are taping this on a Tuesday. On our way into the show, Fred Jacson got in a car accident leaving practice today. I saw a picture of the car. It looked like he definitely hit the pole with some speed. So initial report from TMZ was that he was drag racing Marshawn Lynch. Sounds like there's no evidence to support that. Either way, this comes a week after Derek Coleman, another running back, had a major traffic accident. Is the team falling apart, or is this a galvanizing situation?
I don't know if it's a galvanizing. I wouldn't put it at that, and I wouldn't say necessarily they're falling apart. But I think that sometimes you have weird mojo happens, and that's more what it feels like. And even ET and Sherm had talked about that, or ET had said that Sherm felt like it was cursed this year, and I don't believe in curses or anything like that, but it seems that we've had some great luck with the teams in the last few years, and it's almost as if it kind of ran out. I mean, people aren't getting drunk and doing bad things. I mean, these are mental errors driving, apparently, but it's just kind of it's a bad mojo. And it starts with that damn play at the end of the Super Bowl.
I think we've also forgotten to talk about that they've played probably the hardest schedule in the NFL.
3 of the undefeated teams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That comes into play too.
Sure.
I mean, that's not the reason that they're 2-4. They're a razor's edge between 1-5 and 6-0 right now. I mean, they really are a razor's edge between those two extremes, and that's what most competitive sports come down to, those 3 or 4 plays that we talked about last week, and we're seeing them here. We're seeing, they get that first down in the fourth quarter with Jimmy Graham on the busted play. They come out, do another play action pass, and Marshawn gets nailed for a holding call. So they're behind the 8 ball again.
Right.
It's all of these little things that are adding up over and over. They get a great sack by Atiyah Rubin, and Richard Sherman gets nailed for a defensive holding that's kind of questionable. So as opposed to 2nd and 19, it's 1st and 10 again, and Carolina keeps going. It's these little things that are adding up. The blown coverage at the end is a communication thing. That's not something I'm worried about, because that has not been a thematic theme over and over with them.
Right.
It's been the little things that are continuing to add up.
Yeah, I think that one other thing that we haven't touched on a whole lot is the fact that this team has played 57 games in the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. Half the league or more has only played 48. And so that's a big difference. That's another 20% of mileage of contact, of fatigued contact. And then, not only that, the double cost of it, and I'm not making excuses for these guys at all, but I think it's a factor. For every week you advance in the off season, or everybody else's off season, that's one less week for you to recover, to repair, to get your mind right, etc. So we may be seeing some of that as well, just a mental and physical fatigue where these guys are older functionally than most players their age.
Well, and then if you throw in the offense's ineptness in the fourth quarter, the defense having to be on there, the defense being the key of your team for those 3 or so years.
Yeah, because there's a lot of offensive players that don't have that mileage. A lot of new offensive linemen. Jimmy Graham doesn't have that mileage. In terms of coming off of 3 really deep runs
Bennett,
into the postseason.
you can go through the whole.
But the defense
So
definitely has more miles on it.
And that's what it feels like, to me at least. That
Well, they
just seem gassed, not doubled over kind of gassed, just mentally and physically worn down.
Yeah, this is going to be Pete Carroll's biggest challenge as a coach in Seattle. This is not when he had Tavares Jacson or Matt Hasselbeck when he was first here, and they didn't have the talent.
Right.
They are still one of the most talented teams in the NFL, bar none, within the top 5 easily. This is now what's going on between the ears more than anything, and Pete Carroll is a master motivator, and not every time do you need somebody to motivate you. Sometimes you just need somebody to see what's going on, get the train back on the rails, and get it moving forward, even if it's in small little increments. And so if it's a win at the Niners by 3 points, as opposed to we would like to see them win by 23, a win is a win. And just to get a little bit of momentum going so there's positives to build on, because Pete is as ruthless as they can be as a coach, but is an unbelievably positive person as well, and does not motivate through fear, but more so through praise. So can they find these little wins within the game, the extending a drive, a left tackle making a block that springs a running back, these little wins that they can build upon going forward. I think this is going to be just an unbelievable challenge for Pete. That I'm really interested to see how he responds to it too.
And with those external factors on top of it that you're talking about, a road Thursday game.
Yeah.
This is their second short week out of the last 3. It's, it is fatigue upon fatigue, and they've got 2 more physical games before the bye week. Now, the nice thing about playing a Thursday game is your following week is a half bye, and so I think they're all really looking forward to that, but hopefully not looking forward to it too much. It's going to be really interesting to see how they come out of the tunnel on Thursday night.
Art Teal, before the season started, said that the Hawks would go 10-6, barely make the wild card, and then seriously do some damage. If the offensive line can get their shit together at all, that's what that's completely plausible. And with the talent and the expertise this team has, the season isn't over. It just, for me, it keeps coming back to that offensive line, and it also comes down to the play calling, based on having a shitty offensive line.
Have your expectations going into Seahawks games changed? Will they change this week than what they've been the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be more than satisfied with a field goal win.
Are your expectations for the season lowered?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not jumping off the bandwagon by any stretch. I think they're still a phenomenally good team. But we are looking at 2-4.
Yeah.
There's no way to get around that record.
Before I want to explore this a little bit. Before the season, and I want to ask you the same question too. Before the season, what would a successful season? How would you have defined a successful season for the Seahawks?
Honestly, the same. Super Bowl.
Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Like making it to or winning the Super Bowl for it to be successful. Anything less was leaving it short.
Yes.
As of right now, what would you define as a successful season for the Seahawks?
I think I'd have to say getting into the playoffs. I think that's a realistic expectation, is that they can turn it around and move full steam ahead and get into the playoffs. And again, if the Hawks get into the playoffs, do well, game 2, 3, get into the Super Bowl, then I think they have those capabilities.
Yeah.
But my expectations were unrealistic coming into it,
Sure.
and they've been brought down to earth.
Sure.
Definitely.
We talked after they were 0-2 that I sat here and said 12-4 is very realistic
Yep.
at that point. It's not very realistic at this point.
Little
That'd be a hell of a run.
Yeah.
These podcasts would be a lot more enjoyable if we were finishing up the season with 10 straight victories.
Didn't the 2007 or 2006 the one went to the Super Bowl?
That was the 2005 team.
Yeah, that was
I think they won
13
their
and 3,
last
and they win their last 10 or
10.
whatever. I do my records change. I hate doing the record thing, and I
Sure.
hate guessing who will win because, quite honestly, I never know. This team, what's frustrating for me is this team has a potential of this, and they're playing at this level right now, and this drives me crazy. Whereas the team 2 years ago, their potential was here and they were playing here. Last year's team was the same thing. There is a huge freaking gap right now between their potential and where they're actually at. So what I'm wanting to see is them close that gap.
Yeah.
I think this game is very key in that they can get that extra rest after it to get their bodies back. I'm not one to believe that the wheels are falling off. The number of texts I got from friends that were literally like, the wheels are falling off, the sky is falling,
No.
doomsday. I don't see that. I don't believe that. But I think our expectations of this team have been unrealistic to begin with because we've been such spoiled fans.
I agree.
Since Russell has come along in this Pete Carroll, John Schneider, Russell Wilson trio of talent, whatever, has taken over. We saw them explode through the 2012 season towards the end. If we could have made a sack on Matt Ryan, we're advancing in the playoffs. We go and we absolutely annihilate the best offense in the history of football in the Super Bowl on the biggest stage in New York. We make
that was one of the all-time great football teams. The
absolutely,
2013
and that was one of the
Seahawks.
all-time great football games played by one team.
Yep.
Yeah.
For them to be able to come out on offense and do what they wanted to do, and then defense do what they wanted to do, they dominated that game. Then last year, this team starts off and it's just it's like a car that needs a tune-up, and it's sputtering and it's sputtering and it's sputtering. It gets that tune-up and it flies and it goes. The ending of that game for us fans is so emotional. My buddy Isaac, who I was at the game with on Sunday, was another lineman with me at PLU, and I asked him, I was like, do these games bother you when we lose more so than they bothered you when we lost a game in college? And he looked at me and he's like, yeah. And I'm like, because at least then we had control. As fans, we don't have a damn bit of control, and that's frustrating. I have control in so many aspects of my life, and on Sunday, whether I'm at the game, whether I'm at home with my wife and kids, whether I'm at a bar watching it, I don't have a damn bit of control. But quite honestly, if the team's not doing good, I'm going to move seats in my house because I think I have some sort of control.
Right, yeah.
Or am I wearing
got
the right
it.
shirt? And it's
still
all
do
of
that.
these stupid mental games that all of us fans do that think we actually have any real input other than yelling at the game.
Yeah.
Welcome to Psychological Deconstruction Thoughts here
I have a friend
at
who I
Glow
will not
Nightclub
let-
in downtown Bellingham.
Yeah.
I have a friend who I won't let watch the game. He's never supposed to watch a game because whenever he watches a game, they lose.
Yeah.
Julian.
Yeah. No, it's totally true.
Yeah. And so Julian is not ever allowed to watch a game.
Absolutely. But no, as fans, we've gotten completely spoiled with how damn good this team is. And I think for us as fans, it's going to be fascinating to see how we react to adversity as well as not only is this team reacting to adversity. Yeah. Because the number of people that the sky is falling already, it's fascinating and frustrating.
In the comment section of my last article, there was a thread that was way too long about whether they should fire Pete Carroll. And
Seriously?
yeah,
Those people are morons.
I mean, like, the
you
threat
won't say
level
it.
is high.
You
in
won't
some-
say that, but I will.
in some
Anybody that says Seattle
books.
should fire Pete
Now,
Carroll
to
at
be,
this point,
to be fair, it was like
He
a
started the
couple of
thread.
guys, but it's just crazy to think that
They're
that's like
stupid.
that there are some people who see that, people who
and
you
we're
know
not supposed to insult our listeners or your readers. They're stupid.
Yeah.
yeah.
What-
Well,
Tom Cable.
that's the thing, right? Is
But they're emotional.
Yeah.
the difference in that one or two plays to us is the biggest difference in the
Yeah.
world. It's the difference between we have the right offensive and defensive
Yes.
coordinators and we have the
Yes.
wrong offensive and defensive coordinators. And those are major directional philosophical changes that, you know, if you're wanting those decisions to be made on a play or two, you know, that's just one, it's not how the NFL works
Yeah.
with its hiring calendar. I mean, it's just so bonkers anyway that even if you're a head coach that hates all your coaches, it's really tough to make any changes mid-season.
It's not like
But-
you can bring up Edgar, as
Right.
the Mariners did. Fire Hojo, bring in Edgar. Well, they don't
Sure.
have. There's not a coach just. Oh well, we'll just bring in Lodi Do and they'll replace.
We had to do that when Alex Gibb retired right before the season, or
Right.
went on sabbatical, or whatever happened, and we brought in Pat Rule from USC, and we're struggling with that, and then finally in the offseason we're able to bring in Tom
Yeah.
Cable. That's just not realistic in the NFL.
Yeah.
All the coaches are either coaching or they're in college.
Yeah.
They're not a minor league
Or
system.
rehab.
Right. Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's, hey,
I'd love to see Sark on the team, man.
would you?
Yeah, I
All
love
right.
him, man. I
Yeah.
loved him a lot more when
Sure.
he was at USC because I like Coach Pete for the Huskies
Sure.
quite a bit. But get him in as a QB coach or something like that, something to kind of
Yeah.
help give him some work. The guy's brilliant. I think he'd be great.
Coming up, we've alluded to the 49ers game a lot, but we haven't really talked about it. And this is somewhere where I think we can get a little bit more specific. What matchups do you think, how well do you, Matt, think that the Seahawks match up with the 49ers overall, given how the two teams have performed recently? And are there any specific matchups where you think Seattle is noticeably better or noticeably worse?
So a couple of things that I'm looking forward to seeing. Not seeing Justin Smith and Alden Smith.
Sure.
Because as much I'm not a Niners fan by any means, Justin Smith was a dude. That guy was so fun to watch because he was a crafty veteran that was damn good at holding as a defensive lineman and creating alleys for Alden Smith to blitz. And he just did everything so good that at times you'd see Russell Okung out there and you're like, man, that's just a hard hat and lunch pail kind of day. And I feel sorry for you because he's just a dude. I'm bummed he's not playing anymore, but I'm very grateful that he's not playing. I'm interested to see how much the Niners look differently than they have in previous years. There is a talent void there now where there wasn't in the past. They had a tremendous amount of talent, and they had a great coaching staff, at least offensively, with Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh that put players in great positions to succeed. Keeping it simple for Alex Smith was something that they had to pare down last year when it got too complex. And from what I've been seeing, they have pared it down even more for him. So Seattle's ability to keep Colin Kaepernick from running is what I'm going to be watching more than anything. But then also how our offensive line does against their defensive line. That's our
the
weak
thing.
spot. That's where we have to
Every
see.
week.
If we get a game like the Bengals where we're able to pound them in the mouth and run forward, then we're going to be really nice. If Russell Wilson gets onto the fifth step of his drop and is having to bail immediately because there's pressure because one of the five guys missed their one-on-one block, it could be a long, ugly game. And typically Thursday night games are ugly anyways.
Yeah.
I can't imagine playing at the professional level, playing on a Sunday afternoon. Monday, their bodies have to absolutely be wrecked. Go through a walkthrough. Tuesday's essentially a walkthrough again. Wednesday is when they actually start to hit the field. They're flying on Wednesday, so they're getting on the field for a little bit, but they're not doing anything heavy in pads. And then they're flying, and then it's game day. That field down there sucks. It's going to be a crowd that probably won't be in their seats for a lot of it. It's going to be interesting to see how Seattle reacts to it.
I think that's he echoed most everything I would have said. I think the crowd is actually really a important part of it, or the atmosphere down there. That this is really going to be the Hawks. This isn't the Hawks versus the 49ers in my estimation. This is the Hawks versus the Hawks. If they can go ahead and break through this mental funk that they've been in, then it's not going to matter who they're going to play. And I think that's their biggest nemesis right now is not Colin Kaepernick or anybody on the 49ers. Is if they can get their shit together enough to get a win in the win column.
Their biggest nemesis is the mirror right now.
Yeah,
honestly.
I think that's what it is.
It really is.
These are also guys they have not failed necessarily the last couple of years, so there's a gut check there. These are also guys now, a lot of them, who are getting paid very well. When they came into this league with a chip on their shoulder, ETU is too short, Richard Sherman, 5th round, Russell Wilson, 3rd, all these kinds of things. We've heard them ad nauseum. Well, these guys are now getting paid, and they're
being appreciated.
They're being appreciated, and it's whether or not they can get back that hunger. And God knows I'm not in the locker room. Maybe they've got the hunger, and we just don't see it in the way that they're playing. But if they can get that hunger back, and mentally overcome this, what seemingly is a wall that's growing by the week.
Yeah, it's going to be all we can do is guess at the mental stuff, right? And try and parse through what little they give us in quotes and all of that, and whatever, we don't know. But I think that you can sense a tone, and the tone is definitely different in some way. The thing that I'm going to be looking for the most is what we saw between Russell Wilson and Jimmy Graham last week real? Is that something sustainable? Because he was targeted 14 times, I think it was, 12 times. A buttload of times is what I'm saying. And he responded. He had a bunch of catches for a bunch of yards. I think 8 for 140. Must have been 12 targets. And a lot of them, like you and I were talking about, were contested.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jimmy is covered. That window isn't there. I'm going to throw it and let him create that window and make the catch. And you realize, holy cow, Jimmy Graham is not just this 6'7" guy. He's a guy with a lot of skills. The ability to settle in the soft spot of the zone, like to feel that. That's a talent. This guy is a supremely skilled player. And what we saw a lot of up until this last game was Jimmy Graham is used to coming out of his break, whipping the ball, his head around. Either the ball's there or the ball is gone somewhere else.
Yep.
He's not used to broken plays where he has to figure out where his quarterback is and go.
Street ball.
We saw that. We saw him make a lot of catches on those broken plays for big yards, not little dump offs, like big yards. And so if that's something that from a mental standpoint and from an ability standpoint is a skill that he can kind of master, Doug Baldwin's been great at it. Kind of realizing, okay, look, ball's not there. Find Russell, find a soft spot. We saw Jimmy Graham do that. So if that's real, if that's sustainable, that's your bailout play, finally.
Yeah.
You finally have somewhere that Russell Wilson can look and trust, even if it's not open.
Yep.
I think that would help him a tremendous amount.
It's fun to see. It was fun to see being at the game where you could see him break off his routes as soon as Russell had to break the pocket because, again, it was a sieve of a line. And Russell did not have a space the size of a swimming pool to throw it to. He had a small window, and he would rocket the ball in there. And Jimmy was unbelievable with those catches. I'm thinking the one down the seam route down the middle that he boxes out Roman Harper with his butt and snags that ball.
Yep.
Just how fast his hands are at getting up and snatching the ball and then tucking it away. It's something that we hadn't seen. And that in itself, again, going back to what we talked about at the very beginning, is going to loosen up safeties. It's going to help the running game. It's going to allow their play action to be more realistic.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see if that trust is still there or if it was just something that happened. But the fact that he had 8 or 9 more targets than the next, I think than Doug Baldwin, who had 4.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's force feeding, and he responded, and he's, it's the type of performance that'll tell Russell Wilson that, yeah, I can throw that guy whether he's open or not in case of a bailout.
Yep.
I don't have to keep running around.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting to see. It's I didn't expect this game to mean so much before the season, and I hate the whole must win, but we're a team that's talented has a lot of margin for error, but they've used it all up now.
Mm-hmm.
So it is survival time, and it'll be interesting to see with their backs really to the wall. Will they bounce back like they did in that Green Bay game? I mean, they were dead.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? It seems like a lifetime ago, the Russell Wilson, that mojo at the end of that game, that just you're not seeing that at all right now from the team, and that's what's
Only
kind of lacking.
Yeah.
And
Only
that's
takes
exactly
one.
it. Against the hated 49ers, though, if you ask Richard Sherman, every game's the same, and Russell Wilson said this is the biggest game of the year. So,
that's. I mean, again, that's back to Pete Carroll's psychology.
Yeah.
The game in front of you is the most important one you're playing. You can't play the one 2 weeks from now.
Right. Yep.
I'm curious. I'm sorry. Have you were just on? Did you? Did Fred get hurt today? And
before we went on air, there were no reported
it just dawned on me
injuries,
that because he was instrumental in the third down screens and whatnot. That if he were to not be available, that would suck.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Thomas Rawls only get 1 carry too after coming off such a great game.
It was a hell of a carry.
There were 8 yards. I mean, busts out, goes straight to left tackle, bounces outside the D end, and then stones a corner.
Yeah.
Going out of bounds. I was very surprised he only got 1 catch.
Sometimes I feel like they decide this is what our game plan is, and we're going to do this game plan no matter what happens.
Yeah, and you could see. I mean, Marshawn had a couple of nice runs called back because of penalties and holdings. And
I thought
stuff
he
like
looked
that.
good.
He looked very good.
Really good.
The stats I don't think told the story on Marshawn at all. He was explosive coming out. He was powerful. There was
every
times
yard
where
he had was after contact.
Yeah, basically. I mean, he was pushing the pile.
Yeah.
Marshawn looked great. I was very surprised though that Thomas Rawls only got one carry. I also got to say, Marshawn made a nice pass back to Russell Wilson.
That was a cool play.
On that
we
play
gotta talk about
to Ricardo Lockett. And Ricardo Lockett is one of the guys that on this team I absolutely love, and he pisses me off at the same time because he gets these stupid ass penalties that half the distance to the goals. I mean, the guy's all over him and shoving him, and he just does a little slap to the face that, of course, gets seen.
Yeah.
But then that catch that he makes on the halfback toss-back pass was an unbelievable catch. And you could see him coming out, the safety, or the corner went up towards Marshawn. He comes across the face of the safety, runs a beautiful route, catches the ball. He's one of those guys that will drive you crazy and excite you at the same time. And for a little Division II player, I have the utmost respect for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's funny you mentioned the penalties, and I just want to point this out one time before we go because I was shocked by it. The Seahawks have the least penalized defense in the NFL this year.
That's the problem.
We complain when they have too many penalties, and then we complain when they don't have enough.
It was kind of always the cost of doing business, and if we get penalized for going 1% harder than everybody else does, then the expectation of that play will take that penalty because of what it means, and it's great to not be shooting yourself in the proverbial foot with a bunch of penalties, but it's interesting that we're seeing defensive lapses on a team that doesn't get penalized when we didn't see them much from a team that was getting penalized a shit ton.
I also thought the other thing that was interesting about penalties, so Carolina had 5 of them, delays of game, false starts, and 12 men in the huddle. Absolutely all of them were pre-snap penalties. There was not a penalty on Carolina during a play.
Wow.
And I honestly don't know how there's never a holding or hands to the face or anything like that. And I don't believe the referees were the issue of this game. For me, just as a football dork, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Wow.
It was really fascinating to see.
Didn't
I have kind of enjoyed the lack of penalties on the Seahawks. That has been nice.
Well, we'll probably keep going on this for a while off air, but we're going to sign out right now. Just want to say thank you to everyone who came out for the show this week. Thank you to the Glow Nightclub for hosting us. We'll be back here again next week, and
Talk about the Seahawks win.
Yeah, absolutely. So for Matt and Brent, this is Jacson from Field Goals, and we'll catch you next week.